I'm not going to start this message with the peace greeting because this isn't really going to be a peaceful one either. I start in the name of Allah, who is most just, who oppresses nobody, who is generous in his rewards and severe in his punishments. If this message were peaceful, I would have started it with the peace greeting. I start by testifying that there is no God but him, and that Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be to him, is his slave servant and messenger. Yesterday, I spoke with a friend of mine who worked with me up until about 2 months ago. He has since found a better job and moved to the capital city of the country in which we live. And I'll just refer to him as Mo Darkness. He knows who I'm talking about when he hears this. He now works with different people. One of his colleagues is a South African lady he referred to as Z. Z asked Mo Darkness to look for a man for her, and he said, okay. She began to list her standards, and they included intelligence, and to prove that he must be a chess player, height, a job beyond that of being a teacher, and not being too dark-skinned, along with knowledge of how to cook, and of course residency in the country in which we're living. Oh, and regular travel. So my man Mo Darkness asked her what she brought to the table in exchange, and she answered with, my intelligence, my brain. She said she's intelligent, so everything that she was requesting was compensated for by her intelligence. Now mind you, this is a Zulu South African saying that she doesn't want a man that is too dark. He asked more and learned more. She is a teacher saying that he cannot be a teacher. She cannot cook, but he has to know how to cook. She said she would wash the dishes in exchange for him cooking. She is short, quite short, but wants him to be 6 foot while she just broke 5 feet. And according to Mo Darkness, she's not even that good looking. And frankly, even if she was, she isn't bringing to the table what she requests. Neither in the same metrics or in other metrics that could compensate. She's simply being too little and having too little and doing too little, yet demanding so much. This reminded me of something that I saw about China earlier yesterday. A nice looking lady with a short haircut couldn't find a man. So the consultant, some matchmaking consultant, told her that she was too old and not gorgeous enough. Now, mind you, this is when the Chinese lady only said 2 things. He must be educated and he must respect women. And right there, the consultant stopped her and said, do you think you're at the perfect age in this marriage market? You are older, and even though you look young and you are beautiful, you are not young enough or beautiful enough to make these demands. And she had only had 2. So she wanted to understand this. She says that she wants a man both more educated and higher up a social hierarchy than herself, but she also wants him to respect women, meaning he doesn't run the household. And this became clearer throughout the video. She wanted to bring both hypergamy and feminism to the table while being older than what Chinese men would consider marrying, despite her nice looks. The consultant told her this to her face, and she curbed man after man about them wanting to run the roost, especially since they have to pay the cost to be the boss anyway. Then, to make matters worse, she visited her family for a holiday, and they got on her about not marrying, and she cried in the argument, telling them she didn't want to marry. Her own father said to her, men with high social status won't show interest in you. Yet he wanted her to get married, so this means he was giving her permission to find a man lower on the social ladder than herself. The irony is she was cute and young looking, but Chinese men weren't going to put up with this mess, and she wasn't going to choose between hypergamy and feminism. Just as Lois Lane would never give up one or the other, despite needing an alien from another planet to repeatedly save and rescue her while she curbed a human being named Clark Kent. Now, these 2 real-life incidences and the fictitious one boil down to one thing in common, and that's this combination between a runaway unchecked hypergamy that by itself is sufficient to make a woman lonely, coupled with feminism. Additionally, add steroids to the feminism and give it roid rage, and we have the situation we now have. And ironically, the creation of the Lois Lane and Superman and Clark Kent characters precedes the militant feminism we now know. So this means that the men who created these characters realized that men are just inadequate in women's minds. And let's look at the history behind that too. 1920s, you got these Disney princess movies. Oh yeah, Disney Cinderella movies, Disney's adaptations of these European folktale stories. Yeah, they came about that's when they got exposed in the 1920s to the masses in the theaters. Before you could sit back at home and watch them on the Disney Channel, they had them in movie theaters. So they understood, and they created this in 1938. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. They wrote and drew this character. And the reason they had to do so was that they understood that in women's minds, men are not adequate. And the women are the ones who fail to evolve for the men that Allah naturally creates, instead trying to force Allah and evolution and nature to come up with an invincible man that will never have trials in life that she might have to share with him. See, I bring it back to sex all the time for the same reason that living women, real women with a Lois Lane mindset, insist on everything except sex in exchange for sex, then turn and give away free sex to guys who remind them of Superman and not Clark Kent. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster knew even then that spoiled women will refuse to ever at any point accept the limits with which Allah made men. You can see this by the standards and preferences today in the West and even in nations that are just simply becoming more developed. And this is why you must not only bounce, but make it known to the women in the new location the following. If you act like that Western woman I just left behind, I'll leave you behind too, because she is actually more useless than a prostitute is. Act like her, you'll get treated like her, and be an old spinster following younger men around hoping one will be dumb enough to commit. In the end, we can talk about business and skills, and I listen to those who have more experience than I do, but I don't want us men to forget one important thing, and I'm talking mostly about us black men. But let's also deal with Muslim men who have to deal with the same thing if you're not black, provided as long as you're not one of those that looks down on black people. If you are, I hope you go through the same thing white folks are going through. God could throw you in hell if you're one of those men, and I wouldn't bat an eyelid if you had white supremacist ideas. But dealing with this, I want men to understand one thing. And remember, really, we understand, but I want us to remember one thing, and that is that women have no right to complain about men only wanting sex, because they exaggerate that as it is, when most of us really don't have an easy time sleeping with strange women we don't know, especially when we're younger. Then, on top of that, they forget that saying that is a confession that we men are the ones easy to please, so the women's complaints aren't because we're uck and fup, but because they're just so difficult. They not only want everything in the world except sex with normal men, but they go so far as to demand and insist on it, much like a lazy student can either accept the F's and zeros or insist and pester to get grades they didn't earn and cause a conflict. Many female teachers in Western countries have extensive experience with spoiled subhuman students in the classrooms who really don't see it as wrong to threaten someone to get a good grade with no effort. But they don't see that they're also refusing to perform while demanding so much from men, like Z from South Africa teaching in the Gulf here, or like the lady in China who insists on bringing both hypergamy and feminism into a marriage. Now, South Africa is not the West, it's just developed. There's hope for Z to learn that she can't at any time bring so little and ask for so much. I mean, I'll give credit to South African men for one thing. They look at what women bring to the table. And most men say this. They say, I will overlook one flaw. One. The reason they do that is so that when it doesn't work out and she decides to bounce and starts acting funny, he pulls back. Another man is going to overlook one flaw, but it may not be that same one. So the thing is that women, especially when they reach a certain age, they have a very low chance of finding a second chance. Now, South Africans say that South Africa isn't that far gone. So this probably works. China, though, I want you to understand a lesson from that, black men. That's the opposite of the West. The men outnumber the women in China. which is evident in rural areas where families insisted on having sons. In the cities, it's a bit more even, they say. However, even with women having the numerical advantage, there are women called leftover, and they're missing out on men because these men say they're being offered bad deals, especially if they're well-to-do. Despite the numbers, they will keep looking until they find a woman that is young enough and willing to listen. And when these Chinese women start making songs about how much a man has to have, some of these men say, I can go to another country and not tell them how much money I have and get married. A poorer country not say anything. This bee over here knows how to work, but she doesn't know anything about the inside of a house, and she will spend everything. So even if they aren't wealthy enough to find a cooperative and young woman in China, they'll save up and go outside the country and marry a poor Asian woman. They are not playing games. They will not settle. Absolutely not, despite outnumbering the men. The Chinese are not our teachers or role models, but this is something we can learn from them. Demand that she settle for your reasonable human limitations as a man and still refuse to settle for things from them over which they have control. Do not try to do not try to bring to her mutually exclusive benefits to please her. While she sits up here and takes two good things that aren't mutually exclusive and makes you choose between the two, and then takes two sacrifices for you that are mutually exclusive, but tells you to bite both bullets, like hypergamy and feminism telling you to deal with both. They're mutually exclusive. How dare they come and bring these things to the table and say, you're going to deal with both. But by the way, I want you to have the energy of a young man and the money of an old man, even though those two don't go together. You see how unreasonable this is? If you were outside of the West and they ask you why you aren't with a Western woman from Western Europe, the UK, Canada, or the USA, it's very simple. You look her back in the face, or if it's one of her brothers or fathers that ask you that, you look them back in the face and you say, if she never acts like those women, she'll never have to discover the answer and it won't matter. That's it. I'm going to tell you this. I remember going to the U.S. on my first vacation to the U.S. in 2015. I remember my daughters getting in the car, and I stood outside of the car to talk to somebody about some paperwork. And so a lady said to me, your girls were in the car with no air conditioning. And I said to her, yes, I was right there, but I thought she was going to open up the window. So when she didn't, I came on. I came back in. And she wanted to still lecture me about this, about heat stroke. I appreciated her being concerned about my daughters. That wasn't the issue. What I did not appreciate from her was that after I told her that I was watching and I came back to the car early because they did not open the window, so I was going to turn on the AC, she still wanted to continue to correct me. This is the Western woman. If she makes a point and she's wrong, she'll hold on to the wrong point. And if she makes a point, she's right, and you can see that she's right, she still wants to continue to correct you after you've accepted the correction in the first place. Now, she was there with her husband, but she was the one talking and tried to interrupt me too. So, later on, a few weeks later, I left the U.S. to go back to work. But on the way to the U.S., on the way out of the U.S., I stopped in Northern Africa and tied the knot with a lady in North Africa. And I was spoiled from that point. And there were times I'd be wrong, she'd have to correct me, but when I would say, yep, that's a valid point, thanks a million, she didn't keep on beating the dead horse. She wasn't power tripping. She did not bring feminism to the table. She brought some hypergamy, but no feminism. She wasn't pulling that off. And that was when I said, after spending some days with her, I said to myself, I am not going to deal with these Western broads again. And I didn't. And I've been happier ever since because of it. I also remember one thing, though. I remember the next year when I was back in the U.S. visiting the next summer, and I stopped at a gas station, got some snacks for my kids. And the funny thing was, there was an American lady with hardly anything on. She resembled my wife in North Africa at that time. They just had a phenotypical resemblance. Same height and same face, same hair texture. And I thought for a second, whoa, she's sitting up. So I thought she was living over there, and she's actually sneaking into the U.S. and putting on nothing at all, going out in the public. I realized it just happened that she resembled my wife at the time, but she was a prostitute. And it dawned on me as I left, kind of shocked and surprised that I had seen someone that looks just like my wife, but living a completely opposite life. And it dawned on me as I sat down and I thought about how I had almost fussed at someone I don't know in a language she would not have spoken because of mistaken identity, which was a crazy assumption for me to make. But I mean, the resemblance was just, it was undeniable. I remember thinking, and I came to a conclusion, I came to realize that lady that was selling the drawers was still more useful to a man than that woman that had fussed at me at another gas station a year earlier. A woman with an attitude like that, even though she's just looking out for kids, how's she gonna talk to the husband? She got a mouth. Now she's looking out for kids, but what happens when the husband says, okay, I forgot about that, thanks for reminding me. And he accepts the correction because she's correct, and she keeps on talking. There's no reason, see, that's somebody that's going to drive her man away. Whereas you take the woman that is selling it, and she is surpassing, not because she's doing anything special, she's still just selling the drawers and that's it, but because the women that are not selling the drawers are so bad they let these women of the night or working girls surpass them by default. That's what's going on. Because at the very least, he's getting some kind of bang, literally and figuratively, all puns intended. He's getting some kind of bang for his buck when he pays the one that's selling it. And then he does all this work and commits and brings home even more than just bacon to a wife that's always got a mouth and always got to say something. And I don't mean a mouth sharing information. I mean a mouth having to correct people. Getting less bang for the buck, because we all know they will do this. They will talk that junk and then lose respect for you and won't sleep with the husband after that because what? Simply because they can. Because they were able to talk like this and not get struck across the mouth or thrown out on the street and left with nothing. They talk like this. I can do what I want. I can say what I want. He can't do anything. And before you know it, guess what? She's lost all respect for him. And this is why I want to tell you pickup artists, you ignorant ass niggas. Stop telling guys that women just have to crap test you. This is the age of the independent and liberated woman. Why do they have to crap test anybody? They don't need to make sure about anything. Because they don't need to prove how alpha we are by crap testing us. These women are their own alphas now. They're independent, right? So if they need a man, it's not for all these other things. It's for companionship and for sex. So when they're going to crap test a man trying to eliminate these men, they automatically make the woman that sells it more useful than they are. But you pickup artists, you are reverse pimps. The pimp tries to sell the prostitute to the John. You are trying to sell a bunch of men to these sophisticated prostitutes who don't even give you what you paid for, who demand a lot more and give a lot less, and then turn around and run you away. That's what you pickup artists are. There is nothing special about your particular skill set. It could be used for good if you're really manipulating them, but that's not what you're doing. You're sitting up here with your skill set and you're telling guys who have already been gained by these women, that if they just learn more game, they'll get women. Instead of saying to them, you know what, this bitch is defective. Your best bet is to go ahead and just get you a skill set, save up while getting a passport, and bounce. That's your best bet, because she's never going to change who she is until you're gone. There are other women that aren't going to act like that. They're just not here. So leave here, go elsewhere. Eventually, this society will go back to what it'll go back to something else, because you won't be here to hold it up with your skill set. Maybe then your son can come back here and find someone that'll fuck the shuck up and do what he says if he has to pay the cost to be the boss. I'm hoping that what I've said is a benefit. I also hope that one day it won't be necessary anymore. The blackest man on social media signing black out. Black male power just because they don't like it.